Welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick with co-host Chris Lucian. And today we're very, very excited to have a longtime friend in the community, Garrick West, on the show. And yeah, super excited to dig into building Agile Software Developers, the Debugging Book, and if we have time, reviving XP software crafting after the Scrum backlash. So some juicy topics there. Before we get into that, Garrett, can you give an introduction for yourself?
Yeah, let's see. My name is Garrick West. A little nod to my past behind me. These are some of the first computers that I ever programmed on back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, aka the 1980s. My mom got me into a Apple computer-based summer computer day camp every week from when I was about 10 years old. And
Wow.
every summer, sorry, every 1 week every summer, and I got into that, and I went through all the levels they had, and I was bummed to find out when I turned 15 that there was no more computer day camp for a week in the summer. And she worked for the school district and got a call, and the librarian who ran the program asked if I'd be interested in being a TA. And so while I had
Mm.
my first real part-time job, apart from being a paper boy before that, working at a fast food chicken place, I was able to negotiate some time and get a week. And I got the wonderful comparison of the experience of working fast food chicken, trying not to burn myself on grease in the fryer, and coming home smelling like flour and chicken blood, versus for about, I think it was like a whole like 25 or 30 cents an hour more being a TA and working in an air conditioned lab and helping the little kids, the first year students, debug their Apple print statements, and explain the syntax errors, and working, yeah, no, comfortable air conditioning, working on computers. And I was like, there might be something to this programming thing. So got into it, went to college, studied computer science, and I had a pretty normal course of things until I came across the infamous tome, this book that I'm sure a number of folks are familiar with, the original 1999 Extreme Programming Explained, which and heading out the door from one of my first jobs, sadly to say, I stole. There were 6 copies on the shelf, and one of them walked out at me, and I felt bad about that. And ever since, I've probably paid it forward by getting used copies of the XP White Book and paying it forward and sharing them with people.
Yeah.
So a free shout out if you want to hit me, I'll track them down, and maybe for the first 3 people that respond. If you don't have a copy and desperately want one, talk to Chris and Austin, and I'll do a little bit of a used book giveaway there. I'll continue paying it forward. But
Nice.
got into XP, and that's been like 20 years now. My first 7.5 years at a real core XP shop doing round the world XP. Follow the sun model, team in the UK, the US, and Singapore. And it was an eye opener, complete different change. Realizing that I wasn't as serious as an engineer as I thought I was till I started doing these practices. And got lucky enough later on to get into coaching and training, training developers, watching the light bulb go on, seeing them really understand what a disciplined practice, things like test-driven development and ensemble programming and continuous integration, refactoring, all that cool stuff makes awesome software. So
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, when you first joined our recording here, I thought that was your server room behind you. And when your audio wasn't working, I was just like, oh, you just need to work on one of those
yeah.
print statements, I guess. Or
Well, I mean, they're easy enough to reboot. That's the good part. They don't take that long.
yeah, there's not much to reboot. That's
Not
right.
much to reboot there. Yeah, true.
Awesome. So let's dive into it. What comes to mind to you for building agile software developers?
Yeah, this kind of goes back to my exposure getting into XP, is recognizing that when I'd gotten more experience and was trying to improve my developer skills, I had my XP coach, a fantastic woman named Monica Yap. Um, she had encouraged myself, my other team members, to say, depending on what you want to do, you can just go and practice speaking through something like Toastmasters, or get involved with the local user group community. And at the time, CJUG was still pretty new, because this was circa 2004, 20 years ago. and Java was still new and exciting. And this was a point, of course, that Java was really getting into the enterprise, and XP developers latching onto Java or .NET, depending on the flavor of shop they might in, what they might be exposed with, and seeing, what they can do to apply, refactoring the patterns, all that. And so I wanted to improve my speaking skills. And a local, they've called them community colleges. Now they've dropped the community, in part because they're begun doing 4-year programs. Local college instructor at Highline College, an opportunist, a wonderful woman named Tina Ostrander, kind of got her hooks in me and said, "Hey, why don't you come and present for us?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." So pretty soon, before I know it, I'm doing multiple presentations, and of course, I'm talking to them about test-driven development, giving them examples in class, and doing demos on how to do TDD, talking to them about pair programming. And she started talking more, and she's like, "Tell me about the Scrum thing." And this is around 2011. And we started working together. And in 2012 and 2013, we actually converted their web developer program from being kind of a traditional waterfall type, let's get clients in the community, nonprofit businesses, 503Cs, whatever, say, "Hey, we've got a team of, junior developers here. They're working on their web certificate program. They'll build you some software, be their customer." And so we flipped that around to use Scrum as an approach. And it went amazingly well, as you can imagine. Anything where you're getting that level of feedback, especially if something is as short as a 10-week course, makes a huge difference. And we modeled it into the classroom. We had Tina being kind of the head customer, like product owner, and would help mitigate some things. As much as possible, the customer was the product owner. They did weekly iterations, they did stand-ups, they did demos to the customer, they got feedback. I did the best as I could to try and, they're swallowing a lot as it is, but best as I could to try and get them to pay attention to, well, how are you testing stuff? How are you working on your branches? A lot of cases, this was the first time they'd ever dealt with a source control system, seriously.
Huh?
But overall, it was a big success. They kept that model going ever since, and I managed to make a pitch, and we actually got that presented in 2014 at Scrum Gathering in New Orleans. And she got some funding somehow, even as tight as educational institutions were back then. She got funding to go down, and so we got to present it together. We didn't have the biggest audience turnout, but we had a lot of fun, and it was a great experience putting that program together. So that kind of gave me a good first taste of it. I ended up, getting off into industry and whatnot, and occasionally keeping in touch with her and doing a few presentations from time to time. I was on an advisory board for their developer program, Highline's web developer program, for a while after that. And then she ended up years later moving over to Green River, my associate's alma mater, before I transferred to university.
Nice.
And in winter and spring of 2021, just after COVID, I was actually working part-time there as an adjunct instructor. There were about 40 students, and they have a 4-year Bachelor of Applied Science in Software Development. And once again, capstone project. And I was basically a tag team instructor with full-time classroom instructor, and I was kind of the industry advisor. And so I did the best I could to keep bringing the same things that I'd done 10 years ago, getting them introduced to pair programming and test-driven development, getting them aware of branching strategies, refactoring, trunk-based development. And so, yeah, I've kind of had the bug for that, for the ideas around, what can we do to build better software developers.
Do you think that it requires the industry expert collaboration with the schools, or is there something more broad that can be done, or is it like as many volunteers as we can get?
Yeah, here's the thing, and this is what I really appreciated about Tina, the instructor who reached out to me, is that they said, "You're the industry expert. you see what's going on. As instructors, we see the world from the classroom position. So we have challenges with regard to the structure of the college and formal education process. So getting that information, getting that feedback. Right now, I know that we have a couple of mutual acquaintances who may or may not be watching this right now. Hi, Paige. Hi, Steve. The folks that do the Seattle Software Crafters meetup. They're also involved in another local college in the Seattle area, the Bellevue College Software Developer Program. They run a monthly meetup kind of in conjunction with them. Post-COVID, it's back in person. And to me, I think that's the linchpin. I think the ultimate correct answer is years ago, we should have moved to an apprentice model. And even then, going through and having some portion of book learning would probably be very appropriate, giving the valid foundations of a lot of stuff we do. And the closer you can get to understanding some of the computer science and the mathematical concepts, the more value you'll get out of it. That's kind of where I've ended up in terms of this perspective. But ultimately, I think one of the industry challenges is that I can't remember who the quote's attributed to, but computer science is about computers the way that astronomy is about telescopes or chemistry is about test tubes. And the problem is that all of the industry focus and all of the money that comes in that allows us to do these cool things that we do in creating things with computer is coming from business perspective. And so it doesn't necessarily care about those scientific aspects. It wants to know why the transactions aren't working and where these errors are coming from and when you're going to get it fixed.
Right.
Yeah, I noticed you use the word you're advocating for a more apprentice model. Do you mind describing that? What do you mean by that a little bit more? Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny because in a way it's almost subtly hidden or even applied in the terminology that myself and other folks have used in terms of talking about software craftsmanship. Because historically, in order to become a craftsman of any point, you would go through some sort of learning stages. I think it's very true and a bit of a challenge in our industry right now, especially with things like AI throwing a little bit of a monkey wrench in the works, that there's the Dreyfus model of skills acquisition, which goes through about 5 phases of learning. And one of the key points of that, and I can't rattle them off the top of my head, you folks following along at home, feel free to Google, but at the very base, at the bottom of it, you go through the 5 levels, and the top level essentially is a master where you're working intuitively. But in order to get through from any of those steps, you have to have taken a part in the learning that goes on in the step before. And right now, I think one of the biggest challenges we have, again, throwing a little bit of a rock at AI, is that it's making it real easy to try and tell you that you don't need those first 2, maybe 3 rungs of the ladder. And I think that's patently false. And it's going to be interesting how things pan out in the next few years to see where things go with that. My own suspicions.
Yeah, the over-reliance on such things can be dangerous, but also assumptions from the business that they could eliminate expenses around AI when not truly understanding, right? It's all expected to be a big bang launch of
Yep.
this rather than iterative and understanding where, so those iterations are extremely important even in adopting new technology.
True. Absolutely.
Yeah, but Garrick, I told AI to be an expert, so I just skipped the first few stages. I told it to be an expert
I
and tell me
think
what to do.
I think one of the most interesting criticisms I've read, interestingly, is people talking about the fact that these chatbots are what would be a nice way to put it? They're slick salesmen
Yeah.
in regard to telling you what you want to hear. If you ask a question, you say, "That's a really good question," which by the way, personally speaking, if you ever get those in a meeting where you've got someone very high up the food chain, I always try and mark that one off on my BS bingo card. Oh yeah, that's a really good question. You're buying yourself time to think. Just say, give me a moment, please. We're all a little over that one. But yeah, that whole, ingratiating sort of, is like, I have a theory that, and I'm hoping it goes this way. It didn't work out with game shows, so not all my theories pan out. But I have a theory that I don't think a chatbot is going to be the ultimate better interface for developers, in part because of some of this behavioral type of manipulation that it's doing with you.
Yeah.
I honestly don't like that. I can see the notion of giving it terse, carefully structured commands, and I'm optimistic maybe with the notion of the way open source AI models work, of us getting to something fascinating like some sort of indexing system. Because right now, one of the biggest problems is, where'd you get that from? And it can't tell you. But if there's something that could be used with regard to following its execution and the prediction that went through, to go back to some source mapping and say, this came largely from these sources that it was trained on, which again, you can do if you're open and you're open source, or even if you're, oh, I don't know, something wacky like, oh, what is it? What was it that messed up Napster? Oh yeah, not paying for copyrights. Yeah, maybe if you're paying for copyrighted stuff and you can point back to say, this is where we got these concepts from, it would be a lot better for everyone involved.
Gotcha. Yeah, interesting. And I guess if AI doesn't completely supplant it, kind of maybe Chris's question, but applied to apprenticeship, because I
Yeah.
think his question was proximity of, let's say XP expert to a college class.
Hmm.
What's the importance of the proximity to an XP expert for an apprentice, let's say?
Well, I kind of have one right now. Interestingly enough, my wife is a high school English teacher. And a former student of hers, she happened to mention casually that I was a software developer. And a few years after this individual graduated and actually went through Bellevue's program, and is very tough job market right now for developers. He's got some interviews going on. Matthew, wishing you luck if you're watching this. But he had approached me and said, hey, would you be willing to, talk to me, give me some advice? And I'm like, yeah, let's work on some projects. So we've been working on some small stuff, doing a few basic things. He was actually at, I don't know, Chris, you may have met him. He was actually at Agile Open.
Yeah.
Because he's not working right now, I kicked in for the discount, for the ticket, because I got mine because I was on the board as the sponsorship coordinator. So I figured, all right, half price ticket, give back to the community a little bit, and he got a lot out of it. And so I think just getting a feedback cycle in some cases, to those programs and saying, this is what we're doing, this is how an ensemble runs. That to me is some of the eye-opening stuff. And then of course, instructors turning around, and right now it's kind of funny because my mode, with my current client, it's not just traditional coaching in the team. There's 2 weeks of coursework that we're going through and we're doing. And so I've worked with my fellow coaches on this project, and we've hashed through different variations of different exercises. The most recent thing that I've done that's been a lot of fun, I'm drifting into another topic, but figuring out a way to scaffold Gilded Rose, to deal with different skill sets. Spoiler alert, it also involves using trunk-based development for the class and having them tackle each item in that problem. And if they get the code coverage, say, okay, hotshots, you got the code coverage for the age degree. Good for you. You saw the requirements. Now go work on those backstage passes and tell me when you get to 100%. And if they can't get to 100% because there's some intentional bugs in there, then you can prop down the answer key. And so just kind of like a video game, you can give them time to struggle through and time to exercise and exercise those brain muscles and try different things. If they can't quite get there, then you can give the lesson of, as saith Michael Feathers, you need code coverage. You need to understand that it's good quality coverage, because you saw that hello world where I added one item called a foo and I asserted that the name was foo. Oh, look, everyone, I've got 42% line coverage with one worthless test. So we have some good discussions there. We talk about, test coverage can be a red herring. If I see 100%, I get suspicious. especially if someone's doing something like a Spring Boot app. It's like, really, you went through and you brute force tested some of your config classes. You're not. I have a little trouble there. But yeah, getting that sort of stuff and getting those feedback, because in a lot of cases, the instructors will have that perception, better view of the students, their current background, as well as seeing some of the tips and tricks that we do in the industry to get people exposed to things like katas, and then figuring out how they can apply them.
Nice. Nice. Awesome.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
I was going to say, maybe we should ask about the debugging book and missing from every bookshelf.
Ah, yes, yes. This is kind of funny because I stumbled across this actually during my first XP job, and this is Garrick once again plugging books. This is it. Unfortunately, it only seems to be available in the Dead Tree edition, and it's called Debugging: The 9 Indispensable Rules for Finding Even the Most Elusive Software and Hardware Problems.
Oh, yeah.
The fun thing about this is that this is, and this is the thing that I have to tell people when I talk about the debugging rules, is that this is not about a software debugger. This is pure problem solving. There's examples in here that talk about, why when you've got a slow leak in your tire and you take it to the nice folks at your local tire store, they pop it off and they slowly run it through a typically very dirty thing of soapy water, and they look for the bubbles. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Classic example of a debugging tool in the real world. And so this book, I came across it. I don't remember how, but we kind of used it in our own little book club in my first XP team in probably the mid 2000s, and it made a great impact on me. And I mentioned it, years and years later. It's like, and it started to sink in more. It's just like, people don't know about this book. Why don't people know about this book? And then I realized is that some of the stuff in there, they seem obvious, but even if you've gone through and read it, when you end up in a problem-solving situation, because as a developer, you're solving problems a lot when you're working on code, debugging is something that we tend to fall into, and we don't necessarily recognize when we're in the mode of debugging. And so I kind of decided that it was something that might be worthwhile to popularize a little bit. I've done a couple of different meetups where I've done a presentation on this. If you go online to YouTube and look for Garrick West debugging rules, you'll see a couple of different presentations of it. In about an hour, I go through this entire, give you a breakdown version of this book. It's not too long. It's only like 160, 170 pages. But I go through each of the 9 rules, which I'm happy to rattle off right here because I'm looking at them, not because I have them memorized. Like I'm that sharp. I just want to make sure you think I am. But there's 9 rules, and they actually go in order. Number 1, understand the system. Number 2 is make it fail. Number 3, one of my favorites, quit thinking and look. Number 4, divide and conquer. 5, change one thing at a time. 6, keep an audit trail. The one I can never seem to learn, by the way. Number 7, check the plug. 8 is get a fresh view. And number 9, and the most important at the end, is if you didn't fix it, it ain't fixed. 9 is fun because it talks about some of the most insidious stuff that anyone listening to this right now can totally relate to, which is the horrible, well, we've got an intermittent bug. It's like, oh man,
Yeah. If
you don't have the tools, if it's really nasty, it's like your weekend / the next week could be shot with that statement. It's that's one of the worst. But the book and the presentation that I did, if you go through each chapter in it that covers that, has essentially called a summary kind of. And what I go through in the presentation is I call out all of the highlights that give the color commentary that were the main bullet points that apply to the rule. So like understand the system. Talks about, in order to understand the system, read the manual, right? And it goes some details. I'll tell you to lubricate the trimmer head on your weed whacker so the lines don't fuse together. And all the examples in here are from different stuff. Read everything in depth. The section about the interrupt getting to your microprocessor is buried on page 37. Know the fundamentals. Chainsaws are supposed to be loud. Again, these go through the stories. It's a great book. It's a real easy read. It's kind of fun. You read stuff, you laugh. But the rough presentation that I have, I'll finish up the bits here. Know the roadmap. Engine speed can be different from the tire speed, and the differences in the transmission. Understand your tools, know which one the thermometer is which, and how to use the fancy features on your glitch-o-matic logic analyzer. And the last one is look up the details. Even Einstein looked up the details, knee jerk. On the other hand, trusted his memory. So that's that presentation in about an hour. And to this day, some of the stuff that has stood out the most, I've looked back on and realized where I made some failures. Probably the one that I can give you as a cautionary tale. And if you do this as a developer, if you take nothing away from my little summary, when getting a fresh view and talking to someone else, one of the most important things is not to poison the well. Give them symptoms. When they ask you if you've tried something, if you think you've done what they said, describe what you did. And it's a subtle point. But when I was reading that, rereading the book, since I had read it for a long time, it sunk into me how many times in trying to be helpful, in trying to get help from someone that was when I was stuck on something, that I was either potentially or had possibly in some cases in my career accidentally poisoned the well. And that was just one of those little nuggets in there that was like, wow. Some of the other stuff in terms of, if you build a tool, never throw away a good test tool. I was like, you know what? I've done that. I've made a point of checking stuff in. It's like, yes, I feel that one. So
Nice.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a test tool that I built, and it was, years out of use. Like, we hadn't looked back at it for a long time. And then some other issue came out, and I was like, oh, I could repurpose the tool for this. And I just thought back to it, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I went back and got it, and then was able to turn that into another useful tool. And then it sat again for another couple of years, and then like, even now it's like it's being used for some really good stuff. And well, also though, it's harder to justify, doing the appropriate maintenance to that tool over the years as well. So
yeah,
and sometimes that's okay because you can kind of resurrect it from the dead, and it's
yeah,
a little bit of a zombie for a while.
very true.
Yeah.
As a parallel point, one of the things that I've actually worked into, jumping real quick back temporarily, talking about developer training and jumping forward a little to the stuff I'm currently doing, working with Gilded Rose. One of the things that I've worked out to really enrich the whole way I've done the Gilded Rose presentation is I have a bonus part where I take the fixture that just dumps stuff out to the console, and I use that as a proverbial software vice, aka a seam, and I reroute the system out to a string builder, and I download approval tests and throw it in the Maven package or the Gradle package, and I show them how if you had none of the rules and the problem description, you could still safely refactor and not break anything. And here's how you do it in about 10, 15 minutes of taking one of those test tools, using that seam point, and using it as a gold master. Which is fun and fun for me as an instructor. And I always feel a little like, if you ever suffered through calculus, a lot of times the first week you're coloring the area under the graph, and you're coloring in little squares, and you're trying to measure stuff. And then you get like 2 or 3 days into that, and the instructor goes, and here's the formula for the integral. And you're like, people are slamming down their books, just like, why have we been coloring on graph paper for 2 blinking days? It's a little bit like that. It's just
I
like,
remember that
wait,
moment.
you made us write these tests by hand and understand up the coverage when we could have done that. And this is, you can't always do that. But again, it's another tool in their toolbox.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think you're right because if there's so much, baked into like a snapshot or approval test like that,
Mhm.
you lose what it's about, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good guardrail, but that's one of the things where you're like,
Yeah.
we're going to keep this around until we can get rid of it. It's
Yeah.
almost like you want it in place to get your strangler fig, and then you need to strangler fig and kill off your regression test because you've got better coverage now, so you don't need
Yeah.
it anymore.
Yeah, you can capture the domain then. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. One other note on this. I've done one other thing to try and proselytize it a bit more, and it worked out real well once, and it was an abject failure the next time. 3 years ago at Agile Open, I did the first time I gamified it, where I took the 9 rules and then I took the summary points, and I did a game where people had to match them up. And actually, no, it wasn't Agile Open. It was the Agile camp that we did, and then we did it not this year, but the last year, and there was a huge turnout the second time. And long story short, what I learned is that gamifying it is a good discussion. You can do it, put them on cards, double check it for yourself. I put marks on the back, which summary statement went to which rule. Um, but it works best in a group of about 7 ± 2. If that number sounds familiar, in order to go ahead and have the discussions and to swarm around. And so you've got the big 9 rules, and then you got people going through and they're looking, does this apply to this? No, it could apply to that one. And then you basically do a reveal. Um, and I had way too many people show up in Portland, and a lot of people were like, well, this is kind of interesting. And yeah, I'll check out the book and see ya. So it was like, damn it. And so that was a learning lesson for me in terms of learnings from Agile Open.
Nice, nice. Yeah, returning to your debugging book, the way, on my breaks, I'll walk downstairs and be talking to my wife and kids about whatever and like work or whatever. And what hits me often is that coding, and I think you're right, in at essence, the problem solving is a very wide open problem. It's not like
Yeah.
you're looking at the code and it
Oh, yeah.
says, do you want to do A or B? Like you can literally do a million things. There's a million different ways you could go. It's like a labyrinth. And I
It
feel like
is.
there's a million ways to go wrong. And there's a few ways that work.
Uh-huh.
There's not one, there's
Yeah.
usually many ways that work. But
Yeah.
and so I think like those 9 rules you mentioned really give something concrete to do to make progress other than flail about in the million other options of things you could do, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, I agree. And the thing that I like about it as well is, again, the preference says, it tells you right out, these are in this order for a reason. Um, One of the interesting things under the second rule that has stood out in terms of make it fail. There's a bit in there that people are always a little quizzical about when they say, make sure that you stimulate the failure, don't simulate the failure,
hmm.
which is a very fine point if you've ever gone through debugging and you think you've got a reproduction case only to realize that you don't actually have everything quite wired up and you're kind of faking it. And you realize, oh, wait a minute, I actually have to go a level deeper, which again is a start of, if you understood the system better, you might have had a better chance of making it fail. So you start to go through it over and over, and you're like, oh, now I understand why it's in that order.
Nice. Yeah, one other thing on the debugging rules that hit me was I've noticed it's probably a little extreme to call them like each debugging rule is a mob rule, but you could almost see it that way in
Thank
that
you so much.
Yeah.
I have a note here. I honestly think that a mob role would be a debug auditor, someone who
nice.
watches for when you're falling, when the mob is falling, sorry, the ensemble is falling into
Yes.
debugging mode instead of creation mode, to say, point of order, what's going on right now? Are we starting to debug? And if so, right then, because it's when I fail at, start taking a log, keeping a debugging log, which is separate from your activity log. And if you wanted, you could separate them out. You could say, pointer over, hey, we fell into debugging here. See the debugging stuff that we ran through, and then enforce the rules. And that would be their role as a debugging auditor.
Mm.
Sounds like the traffic cop I had put together
Yeah.
Nice.
from
Nice.
the list. Yeah, I think often sometimes collaborative debugging can get a little unruly, and I think putting things on a whiteboard or a shared space and being like,
Hmm.
okay, we did try this, these were the steps and so on, because I find that uh, that if mobs haven't had negative experiences with this in the past, then they would tend to even revisit the same solution multiple times, same expected
Oh
solution
yeah.
multiple times after forgetting what they had done because they tried all these other things
Yes.
and stuff like that.
And that's the hilarious to me, that's the hilarious irony, is that even an ensemble of individuals will lose track of that because
Right.
they're so focused on all the big distracting elements of trying to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
wait, did we try this? I don't remember. I don't remember
yeah,
either. Do it again.
Yeah.
Oh, the number of times I've heard that, I'm just like, you should have kept
yeah.
the log.
Yeah. Certainly have seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah, and one that I see often in a mob that I think someone's embracing that uh, debugging auditor role without even knowing it is the one experiment at a time. Because I think what can happen is like you try stuff and try stuff and try stuff, and then you forget that the other experiment wasn't erased because someone was
Yep.
excited to try the next idea, and then they
Hmm.
just started, you know. So
It's like,
it's
wait,
kind of like,
that's still sitting there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Shelve it
Revert,
or
revert.
do something.
Revert, revert.
Make a new test. As opposed to like yes anding on to the other experiment because now you're trying more than one thing at a time, which is one of the rules, right? So
We're on a different branch, right?
yeah, yeah,
All of those
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, maybe we should hit the last topic before we run out of time here.
Okay.
Yeah,
sure.
Cool.
reviving
Yeah.
XP software crafting after the Scrum backlash. So, what's this about?
Yeah.
What are you thinking here?
So this is a little bit of not quite shameless plug, but kind of a um kind of sharing what's been a great opportunity in terms of some of the type of agile transformation consulting stuff that I've done in the past. This is the first opportunity, and I was out of work at the time, and my resume was rescued from Dev Null, basically, by the hiring manager. And this was kind of a situation where I literally ticked all the boxes. They wanted someone with XP experience that had done some classroom work, all this sort of thing. Comfortable giving presentations, obviously, only child in case you couldn't tell. Um, but this let's say I can say it's the client is a Fortune 100, United States based Fortune 100 financial services company, and they'd been doing a form of not so great Scrum. There's that great diagram, by the way, from Scrum from XP 1.0, where you get the outer circle with all the team stuff that Scrum provides, and then the middle is empty. But with XP, it actually fills in the individual technical practices and the teaming aspects.
Hmm.
And so, to me, this is the ultimate sad outcome in a lot of cases of so many organizations coming in and saying, "Hey, we're going to change the way we build software by getting better communication." Okay, so you're going to figure out how to build the right thing. That's awesome. By the way, the other side of that coin is that you need to build the thing right. And for any movie buffs here, I'm going to point to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark and point to the headpiece of the Staff of Ra and tell you that while you've got all the information on the first side, that second side that tells you how long the staff should be, without it, you're digging in the wrong place.
Mm.
And so, to me, all the stuff around the technical practices, where Ensemble and TDD and refactoring and everything comes in, that's Scrum is helping you build the right thing. XP practices are helping you build the thing right. And if you
Hmm.
don't have the two of those, you're going to end up with a good old big ball of mud. And in some ways, the only good news is with better communication, you might end up with that big ball of mud faster. Um, instead of failing in 3 years, you'll fail in 18 months. And maybe it'll be closer to completion. So when you go ahead and you decide, wow, it looks like we need to rewrite it again, maybe you have a better shot at fixing it. But so that's kind of where things were at. And this organization had done a little bit of XP practice work with their mobile developers about 5 years ago. And after about 5 years, they started looking around and they looked at their mobile teams and they looked at the rest of their teams and they're like, what are these mobile teams doing that they're kicking butt? You know, they're doing a great job. It's like, well, those mobile teams went through XP training. And they're like, huh, let's get some of that.
Yeah.
And so my company managed to contact, get involved. Companies called Galvanize, by the way, do a lot of training in terms of business to consumer, some boot camp related stuff, business to government, some contracts work there for active duty members as well as veterans. And my little area is a group that's doing business enterprise B2E, so B2C, B2G, and B2E. And our little B2E group had done some work for some similar organizations and got the tap, and then we've scaled up, working with this customer. The fun part is that to an extent we're unprogramming them in some of the things that I like to throw rocks at Scrum about. It's the lean. In my years of experience with XP, it's like I love how much of lean that it really pulls in when you're doing it right. And a lot of the new current philosophy, it's like those time boxes, the big time boxes were meant to be training wheels. And most organizations can't let them go and realize that the real capability of agility is getting to right size stories and flow. So we start with their product owners and getting them in the mindset of no. Yes, we are going to go down to a 1 week iteration. It's not a sprint anymore. And you're not going to be beat up because you missed your sprint goal.
Yeah.
Stop thinking about that. You've got an iteration. And by the way, the only reason we have the iteration is so that you can run a retrospective and reflect on your process. If a story goes over, it's not a bad thing. It's an informative point for you to figure out where you were with your sizing. That's all. That's all you need to do about it. Oh, and by the way, we apologize for the Fibonacci sequence. That was a bad idea. Think 1, 2, and 3. Something small enough you can do it in, a couple of hours, less than a day. I could do it in maybe 1 to 2 days. And 3 is starting to becoming, I think I could get it done this iteration, but it might spill over, means think smaller. And so we start right there in terms of saying, get rid of the S word. It's an iteration, not a sprint. Keep what you know about retrospectives. Forget what you've been learning about. And again, because Scrum's been around through iterations now, if you take a look at the 2020 Scrum Guide, it uses the word software once and saying Scrum came from software. There's nothing about code, nothing about testing, nothing about programmer. You do a search for those words on the document, they're not in there. It's all about that shell, and bless them if that's what they want to do. But for me, when it comes to building software, there's a reason I've been in the XP camp for so long. And so this has been kind of fun in terms of kicking Scrum out a little bit, getting people in that agile mindset. And again, we also go through part of the training. We'll talk about, if you're familiar with the spine model, right? Spinemodel.info talks about the inverted pyramid, talks about needs, talks about values, principles, practices, and tools. And XP covers that nice middle. The Agile Manifesto just covers values and principles, and that's great. XP covers the values, principles, and practices, which is why it really helps teams get guided. And we tell them, yes, we are expecting you to pair program or ensemble. Yes, we are expecting you to do test-driven development. Yes, we want you to move over to trunk-based development because that's how you get continuous integration. If code's sitting out on a branch, spoiler alert, it's not integrated. So we're getting them set up and getting the mindset to go in this right direction. And it's been a lot of fun. Like I said, the whole mix of some classroom work, getting my brain wrapped around it, seeing how different students learn with things like Gilded Rose, what works, what doesn't, better ways of communication. I have to admit, and again, shout out to my wife. I've learned a lot from her about classroom management stuff with her 20 years. And a little bit of her credit to me, when she got burned out on teaching a few years ago, she jumped out of education for about 3 years and ended up for 7 months at a very agile startup, place called Cumulo in downtown Seattle, working with some of the agile coaches there. And she got a taste of real agile. And she's since taken that back to the classroom. At the Agile Open, she actually did the thing about Agile in the classroom and talked about how she had flipped her classroom, recording lectures and basically letting students pull work, and how effective that's actually been. Doing stand-ups. Her students do stand-ups, and there's a little bit of positive peer pressure for how they're progressing through. They help each other. It's actually really neat to see how that gets applied. But
Nice.
again, going back to bringing back software crafting, a lot of that goes back to my origin story, as it were.
Nice.
And right now, this engagement has been a fun way to do it. I'm getting a lot out of it, and
Awesome.
hopefully, it sounds like the feedback we're getting. They've been keeping us going. I've been doing it for almost a year now, and we're still keeping going. So
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. Well, thanks so much for sharing on that. Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful opportunity. And yes, I my passion is the highest for that middle, that XP middle you're talking about there. So I'm with you right there. And we are coming up on our time box. So is there
okay.
anything you'd like to share or plug before we close?
Um, Nothing I can think. Well, okay. Uh, the best thing I can think, again, because I was the sponsorship chair. Keep an eye out for Agile Open Northwest 2026. We'll be down in Portland next year. I think that's closer to where you are physically at. So I'll be the one taking the longer trip, which is totally fine. I love the Portland area. I'm a pinball fan. There's a lot of pinball places down there, as I like to say. My machine's still wrapped up at the moment. You probably can't see it, but um, I don't have a pinball problem. I only own one machine. I can quit playing anytime I want.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Agile Open 2026. Still a lot of excitement for things out of last year. Something I
Nice.
can think to plug. So
Nice. Fantastic. Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you and Chris had a great time at Agile Open Northwest 2025. So yeah, shout out
yes.
for next year.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've been talking with the folks who went and the good things they learned and super exciting, good stuff. So thanks for being a huge contributor in our community, Garrick. Thanks for joining us on the show and sharing about building agile software developers, the 9 rules of debugging and how it can help you, get out of the pit of
Yep.
despair when you're out there coding in the labyrinth. And yeah, some passion and excitement about reviving XP and crafting in the midst of the current waves in the agile community.
Yeah.
So to our audience, please like and subscribe. Please share this with someone else, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What's your opinion on each of these topics? But until then, mob on everyone and have a good one. See ya.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Greg.